You guys have the cutest Star Wars stories. On Star Wars Day, I told you about what happened when my family sat down and we watched The Empire Strikes Back together for the first time. Neither of my daughters had seen the movie before, so it was this amazing moment where me and my husband got to see two people here for the first time in their lives, Darth Vader say to Luke,
I am your father.
This is a big moment for most people because Star Wars is one of those stories that really does bind together our culture. It's part of our shared mythology, and it's something that we refer to all the time. My oldest daughter was in a state of complete disbelief and shock.
Wait, what?
She just couldn't even process what she'd heard. And my younger daughter was just like,
He's the bad guy? The bad guy can't be the good guy's father.
why would I believe anything he says? And all of you did not disappoint with the wonderful thoughts you had about this moment. And it was so cool to hear from you because some of you are old enough to have gotten to experience this movie in the theaters with other people for the first time. Like, wow, what an amazing experience that must have been. And then some of you were younger and said things like, yeah, I knew that going in, so I didn't get to have the big moment, which shows how much it had permeated into the culture. But I thought it would be fun to share some of the funniest and most interesting comments that a few of you made. Mr. Scott the Badger had this to say, being the son of an English teacher, I accepted Vader being Luke's father immediately. The son having to right the wrong of the father is a common literary plot. Star Wars is really hearkening back to an older world and an older way of thinking where, there's almost these like karma type sins that families can commit and that fate can follow you down your line. And so you either need to fall prey to your fate or find a way to fix it. Leia, being Vader's daughter, was so powerful in the Force that even untrained, she was able to repel her father's mind probe on the Death Star without either of them being aware that she was I assume you mean doing it. If Leia had turned to the dark side, now that would have been interesting. I totally agree. I'm sure there's probably some like alternate fiction and probably a whole lot of fan fiction about this, but yeah, like Leia totally would have been a very, very good evil empress. Like I commented that she would have been very good at yelling at incompetent stormtroopers.
I recognized your foul stench when I was brought on board.
I got a real kick out of hearing from those of you who either were in complete shock when you heard that Vader was Luke's father, or that you were like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. It doesn't seem like there's really much of a middle ground. People were either all in or all out on believing Vader. CJ Kane said, I was there opening day, May 1980, lucky, and it was a crowded theater. People were so emotionally confused. Some cried, a few yelled, I knew it! And others like me just couldn't believe it. Vader had to be lying, but in the 3 years between Empire and Jedi, I came to the conclusion that it was true. Rewatching New Hope on my VCR, I kept replaying the scene in Obi-Wan's hut. How Kenobi hesitated when telling Luke what had happened to his father, and understood that something was not 100% true. A few of you told me that George Lucas had consulted with a child psychologist and asked if this scene would be like traumatizing for kids, and apparently the psychologist had said that younger children just wouldn't even believe it was true. And I mean, based on my own family experience, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And denial and rejection of something outrageous is actually pretty rational. If you're small, your world's very black and white. So for someone who is the bad guy, like Vader, to say something as outrageous as, I'm your dad, then yeah, it makes sense. I mean, later when I was talking to my 4-year-old, I, was just kind of trying to get more ideas out of her because I was so interested in her thought process. And she just pointed out that Vader wasn't Luke's father because like they'd only just met. And obviously to her, she's not thinking of this in like biological terms. She's thinking of it in terms of you're either someone's parent, as in being a part of their life, or you're not. And so in that sense of the word, no, Darth Vader is not Luke's father at all. Their only link is biological. Now, I know Star Wars is bigger than that. So this is about like the will of the Force and fate and this bigger power that binds them together. So, the fact that they come back together makes sense within the world of Star Wars. But to a 4-year-old, that seems pretty logical to me to just say, no, Darth Vader's not his dad. He never was. They were never together. He didn't buy him birthday presents. He didn't tuck him in at night. He didn't give him baths. He didn't do any of that stuff. So he's not his dad. So yeah, it makes perfect sense to me that a psychologist would have told George Lucas that little kids wouldn't be traumatized by this revelation because they would just reject the premise altogether. Skyhawk Sailor had a story that I loved. Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, was the first movie I took my wife to when we started dating back in the beginning of 1978 at a drive-in, no less. Oh, I miss drive-in movie theaters. We met because of our school in Millington. We were both fresh out of boot camp. She's a Marine and I'm a sailor. We finished our schools and get transferred to the West. She was stationed in Yuma, Arizona, and I was at El Centro, California, and we got married in Yuma. The way our schedule was, we were able to be at the first showing of Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Due to school was in, and it was a weekday, and there was less than 10 people in the theater. When he said, "No, I am your father," my wife said, "What? No way. He's lying." The funny thing is, while we were watching the movie, the cast and crew were filming the scene of Jabba's sand cruiser in the sand dunes just west of Yuma, which I had to drive through on my way to work every day. I knew a man who worked at the lumberyard, and he said they delivered over 1 million board feet of lumber for a set they were building out in the dunes. 1 million board feet. They just blew up. What a great story. Thanks for sharing that. And, oh, what a sweet love story that you and your wife came together over Star Wars. Oh. Now, this was a story from someone who had had it ruined, but still managed to have a big shock moment out of the scene. Chana Manook said, "Unfortunately, this moment was kind of ruined for me the first time. In the early mid-'80s, my grade 1 teacher read a picture book based on Return of the Jedi to the class. It was a pretty thorough retelling of the movie. That was my first Star Wars experience. I was about 5 or 6 then. A year later, my family purchased our first VCR, and my older brother rented The Empire Strikes Back. I already knew that Darth Vader was Luke's father, so his big announcement had no impact on me at all. Oh, I'm sorry. However, something before that had a huge impact on me, and I was freaking out about it. 7-year-old me didn't really understand about special effects and acting, and I was really upset when Darth Vader cut off Luke's hand. Yes, I knew that the actors were acting out a story, but I thought Mark Hamill really had to have his hand cut off. I was in tears, like noisy kid, ugly crying tears, and never noticed the "I'm your father" moment. What I do remember was my wonderful older brother pausing the movie and explaining to me about special effects and that nobody's hand was actually cut off. Oh, what a nice brother. No, I really like that because it relates to something that happened in my own house. The reason that I knew my youngest daughter was old enough to watch Star Wars was a few months ago, I was just like downstairs, the kids had gone to bed, and so I was just like folding laundry. I was just like folding towels and stuff. And I had A New Hope on, just a good old classic, put it on, get my chores done, enjoy it. It got to that scene in the Mos Eisley Cantina where Luke is getting hassled by those 2 rough guys, and Obi-Wan pulls out the lightsaber and bam, whacks the dude's arm off. Just at that moment, my 4-year-old kicks the door in and stares right at the screen, and there's the dude's arm on the floor with like the blood. And I was just like, oh no, my kid's gonna be traumatized. So I was like, oh, are you okay, honey? And she just kind of like looks at the TV and looks at me and goes,
"That's not a real arm, Mama. And that's just ketchup next to it. It's just a show."
It's funny how different kids can be when it comes to stuff like this because there's nothing good or bad about it. It's just how we're wired. Some kids are really sensitive to peril and violence. Like my older girl, she knows it's fake, but it just unnerves her a little bit more. So she wasn't quite ready for it until she was older. My younger one isn't bothered at all. And then, there's kids like you who you knew it wasn't real, but it was such good storytelling that you got swept up in it. I feel like all of these reactions are fine. It's just your personality. It's just how you are. But I'm very, very glad that when you had a moment where you felt anxious, you had a really great brother to pause, remind you that everything was okay, and it's just a movie. Mary Hodge said, "I first saw Star Wars when it was originally released in theaters. I assumed Darth Vader was lying, and people argued about this until the next movie came out. I was in my 20s. That must have been fun because you would have had a couple of years for those arguments, and there is nothing like a good old fashioned nerd out. It was so fun getting to have conversations with all of you about this. And it's just such a good example of how you identify something as a great work of art, film, literature. Is it something that brings people together? Can we have these shared emotional experiences? And can we argue and laugh and theorize together over it? This applies to any book, any work of art. And the more people can talk about it, the more we can experience it together, and the more we can enjoy passing those experiences on down through the generations, the higher quality the work of art is. I know that Star Wars has fallen from its glory days, but this experience can remind us that truly great works of art will continue to have something to offer down the ages and down the generations. These are timeless stories. They are just as fresh and just as valuable and just as fun to talk about now as they were way back when we were at drive-ins and geeky young kids with our whole lives ahead of us. And it's so fun to pass them on like family heirlooms. I hope we can do this more in the future, and may the force be with you always.